You're just too expensive for where we're headed, Carl said, not even pretending to soften the blow. He sat behind a spotless glass desk, flipping through a personnel file like it was a menu. Across from him sat Martin Hale, 50 years old, senior client relations executive at Revolta Corp in Phoenix. 15 years of loyalty, thousands of client wins. And now it was all ending in an 8-minute meeting on a random Tuesday. Martin had expected it, though. Ever since Carl Maddox became regional director, whispers of restructuring had circled the office. Carl was 34, sharp suit, sharper tongue. He talked about disruption like it was a product launch. In meetings he glanced at Martin like he was a relic. A rotary phone in a 5G world. The market's changing, Carl went on, barely looking up. We need people who understand digital-first strategy, social media funnels. You get it? Martin nodded slowly. I get it, he said. What he didn't say was that he didn't agree. While Carl admired dashboards, Martin remembered anniversaries. When one client's factory flooded, Martin was there with a team and a solution. When another lost her husband, Martin hand-delivered the renewal paperwork so she wouldn't have to deal with business. But none of that mattered now. Carl saw a salary number and a birthday, not 15 years of relationship capital. I understand completely, Martin said. He stood, shook Carl's hand and left without another word. What's it? He paused. Not in shock, just calculating his next move. Back at his office, Martin began packing his belongings. Photos, thank you notes, a plaque from Revolta's first big client. Lisa from finance poked her head in. You okay? She asked quietly. Martin nodded. I'm good. She hovered in the doorway. They don't know what they're doing, she whispered. Carl's convinced the board he's some kind of genius. Martin just smiled and closed a drawer. What nobody realized was that he wasn't angry. He was thinking 3 steps ahead. Because while Carl was chasing buzzwords, Martin had 15 years of phone numbers, trust, and people who hadn't called Revolta. They had called him. Martin remembered the beginning. Back when Revolta was still Bayline Solutions. A windowless office. 3 staff. The founder, Henry Dobson, believed in handshakes over email. People sign with people, Henry used to say. Not with companies. Martin had built his entire career on that. He'd been the one clients called in a crisis and the one they trusted for renewals. His phone directory had more personal numbers than the company serum. But it came at a cost. His marriage had collapsed 8 years ago. His daughter Grace mostly saw him on holidays. At 23 now, she understood. She was the first person Martin called after Carl fired him. They did what? She said, outraged. It's business, he replied. They want new blood. Martin wasn't bitter. He was preparing. The signs had been there. Henry sold his stake last year. 6 months later, Carl arrived with his polished pitch decks and MBA jargon. Meetings became littered with words like acquisition funnels and retention modeling. Nobody mentioned loyalty. A few weeks ago, Martin overheard Carl in the hallway saying, "Legacy staff is costing us more than market norms." Leggy. That was his new label. That evening, Martin pulled up his personal contact sheet, not Revolta's system. His notes. Birthdays. Hobbies. Vacations. And then he called an old friend. David Benton, who now worked at a competitor called Crestfield and Gray. Funny timing, David said. We're looking to expand client services. Martin had smiled. That's good to hear. The day Carl called Martin into his office, Martin already had an offer from Crestfield and Gray waiting in his inbox. He didn't need to think twice. 3 days after he left Revolta, he sat in his car outside a golf club, watching Carl greet one of Martin's biggest clients, James Wilder from Helix Manufacturing. They shook hands. Carl talked with big gestures. James smiled politely, but Martin knew that smile. It wasn't trust, it was courtesy. That's when Martin understood. Carl wasn't just replacing him. He was trying to be him. As if client loyalty could be handed off like a keycard. Martin started his engine and headed straight to Crestfield's downtown office. David Benton met him in the lobby. Didn't think I'd see you this soon, he said. Martin shook his hand. I'm ready. But I want some changes. In a conference room upstairs, Martin laid out his terms. Full control over onboarding his own team and no restrictions on working with any clients who chose to follow him. David raised an eyebrow. You're basically saying you're bringing your portfolio. No, Martin replied. I'm bringing relationships. The contracts were Revolta's. But the trust? That's mine. David nodded slowly, then left the room to call his partners. When he returned, he was smiling. Let's build this your way. That night, Martin sat at his kitchen table with a legal pad and his phone. He wasn't angry. He wasn't out for revenge. He was focused. He started listing names, not executives but their assistants. People who actually controlled access. People he had always treated with the same respect as their bosses. His messages were simple. Just letting you know I've moved to a new role. I'd love to reconnect when you have time. No pressure. By midnight, 7 had already replied. All wanted to set up calls. Martin closed his laptop and went to bed feeling something new. Peace. His first call the next morning was to James Wilder. No assistant. Just straight to his cell. Martin. I was wondering when you'd reach out, James said, clearly relieved. Had a meeting with your replacement yesterday. 4 hours of him talking about synergy. Never once asked about my daughter's graduation. That's why I called, Martin said. I'm with Crestfield now. No sales pitch. Just wanted you to know. A short pause. Then James replied, send me the paperwork. We're with you. That week 6 more clients said the same. No hard sell. No flashy promises. Just trust. It was Catherine Lowell from Oakbridge Finance who gave him the heads up. Martin, just a warning, Revolta called yesterday. Someone named Carl claimed you're breaking your contract. Martin thanked her, then called David, who looped in Crestfield's legal team. You're clean, the lawyer confirmed. You haven't solicited anyone. They came to you. Their choice. The next morning, Martin arrived at his new office to find an email from Carl. The subject line, cease and desist. The tone was aggressive, accusing Martin of client interference, threatening legal action, demanding he return all proprietary information. Martin printed it and handed it to David. He's rattled, David said, reading it. The board must be pressing him. Martin leaned back. He thinks I stole something. Later that day, Martin's phone buzzed. It was Lisa from finance. They're freaking out, she whispered. Carl's been in closed-door meetings with the board. They're bringing in an audit team. Martin chuckled. Let them check. I never even logged into their CRM. Lisa sighed. I know. But be careful. Carl's scared. He promised the board cost savings without losing clients. Now he's lost 7. Martin hung up and called Patricia, Crestfield CO. She wasn't worried. Let them dig. You've done nothing wrong, she said. That night, Martin got a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Carl Maddox. Let's talk. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Copper and Stone K. This doesn't need to get uglier. Martin showed David. He wants a meeting. I'd advise against it, David warned. He's fishing for leverage. But Martin shook his head. I want to see what he thinks he's negotiating. The next morning, Martin arrived early and sat in the back corner. Carl walked in 5 minutes late, scanning the room. His confident walk didn't hide the tension in his face. Thanks for coming, he said, sitting down. I think we got off on the wrong foot, Carl began. Martin said nothing. He just watched. Look, what would it take to stop this? We can match whatever Crestfield's offering, plus a signing bonus. Martin smiled slowly. I'm not coming back. Carl blinked. Okay then, what about a consulting agreement? Referral fees? Anything. Martin shook his head. You still don't get it. This isn't about money. Everything's about money, Carl said firmly. Martin took a sip of coffee. That's why you're losing. These clients didn't follow me for rates. They followed me because I treated them like people, not accounts. Carl leaned back, trying to mask his frustration. Be reasonable. Name your price. Martin raised an eyebrow. I haven't poached a single client. I haven't broken any rules. I just told people where I went. They made their own decisions. Carl narrowed his eyes. The board is under pressure. If I tell them you stole data, Martin interrupted calmly, then you'd be lying. And when the audit comes back clean, they'll know it. You underestimated what I built. Carl's face twitched. How do you even know about the audit? Martin smiled. People talk. To people they trust. Something you wouldn't understand. Carl's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed. panic barely hidden. "I need to take this," he said, standing. "We're not done." Martin watched him leave and knew the opposite was true. They were done. Carl was out of his depth. Back at the office, David walked in with raised eyebrows. "Harold Thompson called," he said. "Your old boss. The one who used to own Revolta. Said the board wants to talk. Urgently." Martin wasn't surprised. As the pieces moved faster, he dialed a number from memory. "They're in chaos," Harold said. "They just realized who they fired." Martin leaned back in his chair, listening as Harold vented. "When the board saw the list of clients you took with you, they panicked. They asked me if I thought they could win them back." Martin stayed silent. "I told them the truth," Harold continued. "Those clients didn't belong to Revolta. They belonged to you. You earned them. They trusted you." Martin exhaled slowly. "Thanks, Harold. That means a lot." "Don't thank me," Harold grumbled. "I'm furious. I spent 20 years building something real and they let some kid gut it in 6 months. What do they want now?" Martin asked. "To offer you Carl's job," Harold said flatly. Martin didn't even hesitate. "Not interested." Harold sounded surprised. "Really? Full control. The title. You could clean house." "I've already built something better," Martin said. "But I do have a proposal." That caught Harold's attention. Martin laid it out. A partnership between Revolta and Crestfield. Clients could choose their service provider but access both firms' strengths. Revolta could stop the bleeding, Crestfield could grow, and no one had to lose their job. "You want them to partner with the company that's eating their lunch?" Harold asked. "I want them to recognize reality," Martin replied. "This is how we protect the clients and the people." Later that day, Martin called Patricia Lennox into his office. He presented the partnership idea with calm precision. She listened, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she said, "You really aren't doing this out of spite." "No," Martin said. "Spite burns too fast. I want something that lasts." Patricia smiled faintly. "And if Revolta says yes? Then we do it right. Split revenue based on service use. Shared onboarding. My team handles the transition." Patricia nodded. "You just might be the first person in this industry to get fired and come out with 2 companies working for him." The next morning, Martin's phone rang. It was Harold again. "They're in," he said. "Partnership pending legal review. And Carl's been asked to resign, effective immediately." "What about the employees?" Martin asked. "No more restructuring," Harold confirmed. The board realized their mistake. They got caught up in buzzwords and forgot what actually makes a company work. Martin thanked him. When he hung up, he felt something unexpected, not triumph but relief. Patricia stepped into his doorway. "Well, we have a deal," he said. "Now we build something that actually lasts." 6 weeks later, Martin stood in front of a packed room at Crestfield and Gray's Conference Center. Clients from both companies, board members, former Revolta staff, and Harold sitting in the front row, arms crossed and proud. "Today," Martin began, "isn't about winning or losing. It's about remembering what matters in business. People. Not spreadsheets. Not buzzwords. People." The crowd applauded. The partnership terms were simple. Clients chose their lead provider. Services were shared. Revenue split based on value delivered. And Martin's client team would oversee the transition, on both sides. After the announcement, James from Helix Manufacturing shook Martin's hand. "When you left Revolta, I figured we'd just follow you. But this is smarter. You made the pie bigger for everyone." Catherine from Oakbridge nodded beside him. "That kid never understood what he threw away. But we did." Later, as the crowd mingled, Patricia found Martin by the windows. "The board's calling this a masterstroke," she said. 6 weeks. 2 companies saved. Clients secured for years. Martin smiled. "All I did was remind them of what they already knew." 1 month later, Martin left the office early to meet Grace for dinner. She was glowing with pride. "So let me get this straight," she said, laughing. "You got fired, then convinced 2 companies to work together, and now everyone calls you a genius?" Martin chuckled. "It's not about being a genius. It's about doing what's right. That's all." "Still," she said, raising her glass, "that guy who fired you, What's his name again? Carl, Martin answered. Last I heard he's working at a tech startup in Tucson. Grace smirked. Figures. They probably love his buzzwords. That night, Martin returned to his quiet home and found a package on his doorstep. Inside was a framed photo of the original Bayline Solutions team, just 4 people standing in front of a shabby office. A note was tucked in the corner. People sign contracts with people. Never forget that. Harold. Martin smiled and placed the frame on his desk the next morning, where every client could see it. It wasn't just a photo, it was a foundation. A reminder that even in a changing world, trust never goes out of style. The weeks that followed weren't filled with crisis calls or legal threats. They were filled with meetings, conversations, rebuilding. Martin spent his days doing what he did best, connecting with people. Sometimes it was lunch. Other times a phone call. No sales pitch, no tactics. Just listening, helping, understanding. The partnership thrived. Clients were happier. Employees felt secure again. Martin had become not just a leader, but a bridge. Between 2 companies, between old ways and new. Between what had been and what was now possible. On a sunny Thursday morning, Martin walked into the office, poured his coffee and checked his calendar. A full day ahead, every hour booked. But for the first time in years it didn't feel like a grind. It felt like purpose. As he picked up the phone to make his first call, he smiled. He hadn't just survived being fired. He turned it into something stronger, better, and more lasting than anyone had expected. Not by shouting. Not by fighting. But by remembering what everyone else had forgotten. Business is personal. Always has been. Always will be. Moral lesson. Loyalty, trust, and integrity will always outlast trends and titles. In a world chasing quick wins, it's the quiet consistency of human connection that builds true legacy.